Her Tinder profile was still using photos from our vacation while she told everyone I was too sensitive about marriage. After 4 years together, she had written, "Still open to the right one." Like I was just a placeholder. I saved the screenshots, moved out quietly, and let her keep telling her version until someone at a BBQ asked why her settlement dinner was reserved under my name. I'm Alex. Mid-30s. I work as a project coordinator at an insurance firm. Not the kind of title that turns heads at a dinner party. I've known that for a long time. It pays well. I've been there 6 years, and I'm genuinely good at it, but it is what it is, and I've never led with it in a room full of people I was trying to impress. Qley and I met when we were both 29. A mutual friend's birthday. She walked in already talking to half the room before she'd taken her coat off. I watched her for a few minutes, then went over and said something, and she laughed, and that was how it started. She worked at a marketing agency downtown. She had a whole world of clients and networking dinners and industry things that ran alongside my life rather than through it. I didn't mind that at first. She was sharp, she was magnetic, and something always seemed to be happening when she was around. I was the steadier one. I remembered anniversaries. I made the reservations. I had, for the first couple of years, a small box in the closet with ticket stubs and a few restaurant receipts from dinners we'd been on. I kept them because I thought someday they'd mean something. I want to be fair about what we actually had. 4 years is a real thing. She was funny, actually funny, not just socially funny. She pushed back on me when I needed it. I loved a lot of things about her, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there were things I let slide. Early on, she told me not to mention my job at one of her company's charity events. She said the insurance angle made things awkward. I laughed and said sure. There were dinner parties I wasn't invited to, too small, too casual, I'd be bored. She introduced me by first name to people who had known her for years. "No, this is my boyfriend, just Alex." And then she was already turning to something else. Sometimes mid-story at someone's kitchen table she'd cut in. You really don't need to tell them that part. The room would move on. I'd let it go. I told myself she was just a private person, that she valued her independence, that I was reading too much into things. I was wrong about what she was protecting. That dinner at Il Ponte was a Saturday. No occasion. We'd had a normal week, or at least one that looked normal from the outside. The restaurant was the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list that went on longer than necessary. Qley liked places like that. I had been thinking about the ring question for a few weeks. Not obsessively, just the way you think about something when you've been with someone for 4 years and you're starting to wonder which direction you're actually heading. We'd been living together for 2 of those years. I was 33. It felt like the natural next step, and I didn't think there was any reason she'd disagree. I set my fork down and said, casually, that maybe it was time to look at rings. Her expression didn't become emotional. It became flat. There was a brief pause and then, "Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I'm settling." And then she laughed. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. Just a short, easy laugh, like the thought was slightly ridiculous and she was relieved to have said it. I held my water glass and didn't say anything. She made a comment about the pasta. I answered. The waiter came by. We ordered another drink. The conversation moved on like it had somewhere to be. On the drive home alone in my car, Uber pulling up behind me somewhere back there, I kept turning it over. She hadn't said not right now. She hadn't said she needed more time, or that the timing felt off, or that she was scared of the commitment. She had said she didn't want people thinking she was settling. That wasn't a statement about the future or the timing. That was a statement about me, about what I represented to the people in her world. I texted when I got home. "You doing okay?" She sent back. "Yeah, tired. You?" I said I was fine. We didn't mention the restaurant. I lay there that night with the lights off and turned the sentence over in my head. Not frantically, methodically. The way you handle something when you're deciding whether it's actually broken. By morning, I decided it was. The next morning, her text came in around 9. "You're being weird." I was joking. Then, when I didn't respond within the hour, "You know how you get. You're spiraling over nothing. No apology." "No, I said it badly. Let me explain." Just to reframe. The version where I was the problem, an overthinking, too sensitive person manufacturing a crisis out of a throwaway line. She diagnosed me before she asked me anything. I sat with that text for a while. And then, because I had a quiet apartment and nowhere to be, I started thinking backward. Not to build a case, just to actually look at the thing clearly, without the excuses I'd always handed it. The charity event. Don't mention the insurance thing, it makes things awkward. I'd laughed. Said sure. Moved on. The dinner parties. Too small. Too casual. I'd said okay. The introductions. 4 years in, and she was still introducing me by first name alone to people she'd known for a decade. No context. No, this is my boyfriend. Just Alex. And then she was already looking somewhere else. The stories. You really don't need to tell them that part. Said gently, like a favor. Like she was doing me a kindness by keeping me from embarrassing myself. The room would move on. I'd let it go. I had lined all of this up before and told myself it didn't add up to anything meaningful. She was a private person. She valued independence. I was reading too much into things. And I'd believed that, or decided to believe it, because the alternative was harder to sit with. But standing in the kitchen that morning with her text on my screen, you know how you get, I heard all of it differently. She wasn't protecting her independence. She was managing what I looked like from the outside. She had been doing it for years, in small pieces, and I had been handing her the space to do it every single time. I texted back, I heard you. I'm not spiraling. I'm thinking. She called that afternoon. She said I was too sensitive. That she'd been honest, and I should be glad for that. Most couples couldn't talk the way we could. She said I was turning nothing into something. I said, okay. I don't think I said much else. I sat in the kitchen for a while after that call and didn't do anything in particular. I didn't cry. I didn't make a plan. I just sat there with what I now knew and let it be what it was. She hadn't apologized. She'd doubled down. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't try to explain my way back into her good graces. A few days after the restaurant, Sierra texted me. Hey, Qley mentioned you've been stressed lately. You doing okay? I thanked her. Said I was fine. She said to reach out if I needed anything. I called Ben that evening. Ben's been my best friend since college. I told him what happened at El Ponte, start to finish, the exact words she used. He let me get through the whole thing without interrupting once. When I finished, he said, very flatly, she said that? Yeah. She said that. He was quiet for a second. Then he told me that Qley had called him earlier that same day. She'd said I was going through something, that I was shutting down and not communicating, that she was worried about me and didn't know what to do. I sat with that. She hadn't asked me once how I was doing. She'd texted me that I was spiraling. She'd called me too sensitive on the phone. And then she had called my best friend to tell him she was worried about me, phrasing it like a wellness check, like she was the concerned one and I was the one with the problem. She was running a version of events. She needed the people around us to hear it before they heard mine. The story was, Alex is struggling with something personal, Qley is being patient and supportive, and if anything falls apart here, it's because Alex couldn't handle honest conversation. It was a clean story. The kind that held up if nobody looked too closely. I didn't call her to confront it. Calling her to say I know what you're doing would have only added more material, more proof that I was difficult, reactive, unable to let things go. So I just noted it and said nothing. She called twice more that week. I picked up the second time and said I needed some space to think. She said that was completely fine. She understood. She was there whenever I was ready. I said okay. She said she loved me. I said okay. I got off the phone and stood in the kitchen. Not angry, just clear. The narrative she was building with Sierra and Ben only worked if I stayed inside it and played my part. I was thinking about what happened if I didn't. Ben texted me that night. For what it's worth, I didn't buy what she was selling. I said I knew. I told him I'd keep him posted. I didn't say anything else to anyone. I just waited. About a week after the restaurant, Ben called me. He'd been out with a group the night before. Someone in the group had been on Tinder, swiping at the bar. A profile came up on the screen. It was Qley. He called me the next afternoon. He told me carefully the way you tell someone something that's going to land badly and you want to give them room for it. The profile was active. The photos were recent. He wasn't sure what to do with it, but he felt like I needed to know. I thanked him, said I was okay, got off the phone. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I looked it up myself. Not because I doubted Ben, I didn't. I just needed to see it with my own eyes before I decided anything. It took less than a minute to find. The profile was there. The photos were from the past few months. I recognized the gray jacket in one of them from a weekend trip we'd taken in October. We'd driven up the coast, stayed 2 nights, taken photos at a viewpoint. She was wearing that jacket in one of them. That same jacket was in her Tinder profile, taken around the same time, looking a little better than the one I'd taken on the trip. The bio read, "Figuring out what I actually want." I put my phone down. I stood up and walked to the window. The street was doing its ordinary thing outside. I stood there for a moment, not moving. Then I said it out loud, quietly, to the empty room. "I understand everything perfectly now. I need to be clear about something, because this is the part people get wrong. The Tinder profile was not why I left. The restaurant was why I left. The morning texts were. The phone call where she called me too sensitive. The way she'd called my best friend to say she was worried about me when she had never once, not once, asked me directly if I was okay. The Tinder profile was just the last piece of the same shape. She hadn't been privately unsure while still trying to commit. She had been keeping options open. The settling comment wasn't anxiety about the future, it was an honest evaluation she hadn't meant to say out loud at dinner. I laid it all out in my head. The charity event. The introductions by first name alone. The dinner parties I wasn't invited to. The stories cut short at kitchen tables. The restaurant, the double-down texts. The PR calls to Ben and Sierra. And now the profile. With its recent photos and its bio about figuring out what she actually wanted, as if she'd been on a solo journey of self-discovery the whole time rather than in a 4-year relationship with a person who kept ticket stubs in a box in the closet. It all held the same shape. A woman who had been carefully curating what I looked like to her world, while quietly leaving the door open for something she considered less of a compromise. I knew what I was going to do. I didn't feel dramatic about it. I just knew. I didn't call her. I didn't arrange a conversation, send a long text, or prepare anything to say. I didn't want to give her something to argue with or negotiate around. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to be done. On a Tuesday, while she was at work, I packed 2/3 of my things. The apartment had been evenly split from the start. We divided everything when we moved in 2 years ago, which made this cleaner than it could have been. I took my books, my clothes, the French press I'd bought when we first moved in, some things from the kitchen, the small box from the closet with the ticket stubs and the anniversary receipts. I took that too. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because I'd put them there, and they were mine. I moved through the apartment efficiently. There was nothing to think through. The decision had already been made, so the packing was just logistics. Before I left, I set my keys on the kitchen counter. Not on the table. Not on the couch or somewhere she might not notice right away. The counter, just inside the door, first thing she'd see when she walked in. I wanted her to know what she was looking at before she'd even put her bag down. I locked the door behind me with my phone and drove to Ben's. She called 5 times that evening. I watched the screen each time and let it ring through. The following day, she got through to me. I picked up once because I thought she'd at least earned that much. She started saying something I genuinely don't remember what, and I said, "I heard what you said. Say no more." She kept talking. I ended the call. She called back within 30 seconds. I let it go to voicemail. The week after, I went back for the rest of my things while she was at work. A friend helped with the boxes. No conversation, no scene. I took what was mine and left. That was the last time I was in that apartment. There was nothing cinematic about it. No closing speech, no dramatic exit. Just boxes and a car and a drive to my best friend's place, where I finally slept without waking up in the middle of the night. 2 weeks after the restaurant, Tom and Sierra were hosting their summer barbecue. They did it every few weeks, no occasion, just whoever in the friend group could make it. Casual. The kind of thing where people showed up around 6 and stayed until the beer ran out. It was the first time Qley and I would be around the same people since I'd left. Ben asked if I wanted to skip it. I said no. I got there early. Tom was already at the grill. Sierra was carrying things out to the patio table. I grabbed a beer, went over to Tom, and we talked about his bathroom renovation for a while. He'd been in a standoff with his contractor over a tile order for 3 weeks. He had a lot to say about it. It was easy, and I needed easy. Qley arrived about an hour in. She'd put effort in. She always did, but there was something more deliberate about it that evening. She came in, made a quick loop of the group, said hello to everyone. Within a few minutes, she had worked her way over to where I was standing near the edge of the patio. She said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." She asked if we could step inside for a few minutes to talk. I said I was fine here. She nodded. She circulated back into the group. She talked to Sierra for a while, then to a couple of others. I watched, from across the yard, as she kept recalibrating. She'd come with a plan for how this evening was going to go, and the evening wasn't cooperating. About 40 minutes in, she came back. Tom had stepped away from the grill. Sierra was a few feet away refilling drinks from a cooler. There were a couple of other people in earshot. Qley's voice came up just slightly, not loud, but enough. Can we just talk? You're making such a big deal out of one comment. I looked at her. You told me not to bring it up, I said. Something shifted. Sierra had stopped moving. She'd been tilting a bottle over a cup, and she just stopped, held it there. She'd heard Qley's version, the stressed boyfriend, the patient girlfriend, Alex going through something personal. She had not, until this moment, heard Qley refer to what had started everything as one comment. That phrasing confirmed there was a specific thing. It told Sierra what shape the actual story was in. I could see her working out what it meant. Tom had set his tongs down. He was looking at the ground, which meant he was listening. The couple of people nearby had gone quiet in that way. People go quiet when they realize a real conversation has started by accident. Qley said, I was nervous. I didn't mean for it to sound like. I said, say no more. I turned and walked back into the group. I found Tom's brother near the fence and asked him something about the renovation, some detail about the tile dispute I half remembered from earlier. He answered, we talked about it. I stayed in that conversation. Qley didn't follow me. I stayed another hour, had another beer, helped carry dishes inside when things started to wind down. Qley stayed mostly on the other side of the yard for the rest of the evening. When I said my goodbyes, I went around to everyone, Tom, Sierra, a few others. I stopped at Qley and said, take care, she said. Yeah, you too. I walked to my car. On the drive back to Ben's, I thought about how short it had been. She'd spent an hour working up to it. The actual exchange had taken less than 2 minutes. She had confirmed in front of Tom and Sierra, the two people she'd been working to manage, that there had been a comment, that I hadn't brought it up, and that she had been the one to bring it up herself. In trying to make me look like I was overreacting, she had confirmed that there was something to react to. I hadn't said a word about what she said at the restaurant, hadn't mentioned the Tinder profile, hadn't given anyone context or asked for anyone's sympathy. I had said one thing, that she told me not to bring it up, and I hadn't. She had done everything else on her own. The texts came that night. I read them in order without response. Then the voicemail, around 11. I listened to it the next morning with my coffee. She was crying. Not the kind of crying that's performed for an audience, the kind that happens when someone hasn't cried in front of anyone in a long time and is now doing it alone into a phone, not fully sure anyone will hear it. She said she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. She was scared. She didn't want to lose me. Her voice broke on scared. Then she kept going. I didn't want people thinking I was settling, but that's not what I think. That's not. She couldn't finish the sentence. I sat with that for a moment. I'm not going to say it felt like a victory. It didn't. What I felt was something quieter, a kind of recognition. She was doing exactly what she had laughed at the idea of doing at that restaurant table. She was raw and unguarded and chasing something, and she couldn't hide any of it. She was using words she had mocked me for almost needing. The settling frame had reversed. Completely. Without me having to say a word. I didn't call her back. I didn't save the voicemail. I listened to it once, put my phone down, and finished my coffee. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. The friend group recalibrated on its own. I didn't make a case to anyone or pull people aside to explain what had happened. But the barbecue had happened in front of Tom and Sierra, and what Qley had confirmed their one comment, and me saying I'd kept my word and not brought it up, had done more than I could have said directly. People talked, and what they talked about no longer matched Qley's version. Sierra texted me about 3 weeks later. She said she was sorry about how things had ended, that I had handled it well. I said thanks. The practical things got sorted without drama. Shared subscriptions untangled. A box of her things, a scarf, a book, a pair of earrings she'd texted about I left at the front desk of her building with her name written on it. No note. That was the last thing. I slept better than I had in over a year. I think about that Saturday at Ilpani sometimes. Not with anger, not anymore. I think about the moment she set down her glass and said those words and then laughed, and how I sat there holding my water glass and said nothing. At the time, the silence felt wrong, like I should have said something, pushed back, made her explain herself. But the silence was right, because inside it, I had started to understand. And once I understood everything, there was nothing left to say. She had needed people to not think she was settling. I made sure they wouldn't have to.